welcome to Beyond the Veil. My name is Steve. I'm here with my friends
Manny,
Scott,
Raphael.
Juan.
All right, and this week we're continuing our discussion from the introduction to the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. Last week we read the first fundamental of Spiritism. So we're in the introduction under item number 6, and basically Allan Kardec is giving the main points of the doctrine, so that that way it's like you get like a taste of everything. And so let's just go ahead and we'll read number 2.
So number 2 says, God created the universe, which comprehends all beings, animate and inanimate, material and immaterial.
Okay. So maybe we can just sort of recap last week's discussion. Last week we were just talking about what is God, basically. We're talking about God is immaterial, all-powerful, eternal, immutable, and supremely just and good. So at this point sort of is a continuation from the last point. Just talking about still like what God is. God, it's basically saying God is the creator. What is the creation involves the material world and the immaterial world. And that's something that we often don't consider because, you know, being here in this human body, having this human experience in this material world, we don't often consider that this material world is secondary to the spirit world. And the spirit world, you know, the material world could end, life on this planet could cease, you know, and everything here could turn to dust basically, but the spirit world will remain eternally. We just had a lecture tonight about what kind of our world, it was called, our world. So we're coming out of that. So that's why I was like, this is actually a pretty good topic for us to talk about because all this stuff is kind of fresh in my mind from just listening to the lecture about our world. When, you know, I was giving the speech, just happened to mention like sometimes we don't always consider that there's a whole spirit world like next to us all the time, and that and the way that we sort of interact between the material world and the immaterial world.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes we don't even stop to consider the impact that that we have on the material world, and that everything else and everybody else in the material world has on us. Much less we think about the impact that we have in the invisible world or the spiritual world, and that all the beings in the spiritual world have on us. So basically there is a relationship between those two worlds, and it's impacting us constantly. But the thing that shocked me was to stop to think that most of the time I don't even consider the impact or the implication of the material world and the energy from other people, and from, you know, from everything in this planet, and how what I do and how I act and even how I think, it's impacting others at this material level, which is next to me, you know, which I can at least see and perceive with my regular senses. So you know, much less in the spiritual world, but the impact is pretty big.
Yeah, a lot of cultures, we've kind of lost this in, you know, Western society, and especially the United States, but a lot of cultures had some notions of the spiritual world. And a lot of cultures, it was around the time of when Americans celebrate Halloween. In Mexico, they have, you know, Dia de los Muertos, and it's very similar to what the Celtics used to celebrate. It was something called Samhain, some kind of Celtic old tradition, and they used to believe that during that time of year, there was like a veil that separated the spiritual world from the physical world, and during that period, that veil was very thin, and spirits could more easily move into the physical world. So these concepts have been around, And there's a lot of cultures that believe in these things. In some cultures, it's been lost, but it's a natural phenomenon that's been around for a long time, that it affects us. Even though we may not consider it, it affects us in ways that we can't explain. It affects how our thoughts, it affects our actions, and it affects the people around us. And we affect, like Juan was saying, we affect that world as well.
That's really kind of interesting too, because when you talk about that, some of these ideas have been around since the dawn of time. You know, like the fact that we're here talking about Spiritism, and Spiritism was kind of like codified in the 1850s or so, like solidified into like a doctrine at that time. The ideas that Spiritism has like aren't just from then. They've been around since like the birth of mankind and civilization, you know, and what Spiritism does really is put a science to that notion, but it also, in a certain way, it actually opens up like that in some cases, like we might say, like when I was growing up, like we did not celebrate Halloween in our house because we were, you know, in a certain religion, and that was not part of our our thing. But it doesn't, like with Spiritism, it actually makes us more tolerant of other religions and ideas, that we can say like there's actually some value to an old tradition like that, where we're actually just accepting the idea that there's a spirit world next to ours, you know, because
I mean, it's something to be afraid of. People are afraid of that. They're afraid to even talk about it. But I mean, it's a part of life. I mean, you're born. You're gonna eventually die. But, and it's not the end. You know, it's just another step in the journey.
You know, to piggyback what you're saying is, this reemphasizes to me, if God creates something that's material and immaterial, it furthers my personal belief in that there's an afterlife, that this is an immortal thing that we're experiencing. It's an energy that creates not only physical things, but things that, you know, the things that we can see, feel, touch, hear, but also in the spiritual world, things that we cannot see. And that's just something that goes into a belief, but it's a science attached to it. To me, that kind of sticks out.
In addition to that, the talk was about, you know, beings, material, and beings, immaterial. Right, so that's a question in itself. So now there's things we can see and can't see, or we know our world as material. Everything is something we can touch or smell or feel. You know what I mean? So again, how does this immaterial thing work? Right. So that's a big part of what we're talking about here. So if this is part of creation, you know, not just things, but beings. So that takes us to the next level of curiosity, is what is that, right? So we know through Spiritism what that is, and that's, you know, discarnate people, souls, spirits without a human body or whatever body maybe they once had. If they're visiting this planet, then maybe they're from somewhere else, and potentially their body could be different than what we know as human, or humanoid, if you will. So, you know, in that exploration in itself, you know, even scientists come to the point where, you know, they thought that space, you know, there was part of space, there was like nothing there, you know, it's just like an empty space, and they realized, now that empty space, really, there's something there. Again, so, you know, there's again, not just the beings, which are incredible in itself, that we're exploring and learning, and more of the world we're hoping that we'll kind of learn through Spiritism, these facts that we are eternal and continue to live. But again, from beings to everything else can be material or immaterial, and let's read between the lines, and anything in between, partially material, partially immaterial. So again, as we know, as through Spiritism, as we grow, you know, we continue to get lighter and lighter. So our bodies and the material makeup of our bodies would continue to get thinner and thinner material, less and less material, as we elevate ourselves towards perfection. So again, we could go further on that, but so knowing that the universe is comprised of beings of all types, that, you know, creates the wonder, and wow, what's that for? What is it about? Who is that? How is that? And again, you know, this is why we're here, to kind of open up, you know, beyond the veil. Let's get a little bit further into what we're talking about.
You guys are making me think a lot too, like in this statement, because we even said, like, before we started, this is just this one little sentence, like, what's there to really talk about? But it's like there's so much to talk about in just these few words. Like, like what Juan was saying, how we don't even realize sometimes how our thoughts and our actions impact the spiritual world and the material world in different ways. And as spiritists, like we're constantly, like almost like a mantra, trying to remind ourselves that we're not bodies, we're spirits, like inhabiting a body. And like our connection to matter is so strong that we don't even like identify. And even as spiritists who read all this stuff, like all these books and everything, we still like are so tied to matter, we can't like remember that. And what we're really saying is God created us as spirits, and like we're having this material existence like now, you know, this temporary existence. But you know, and when we talk about some of the things from the Andre Louis books, where they talk about the different subtle bodies that we have, you know, and I mean, Alan Kardec always talks about the perispirit, but then there's also other layers too, the double etheric and the mental body and everything. It's like, that's actually, you know, us. Our identity is like, we are immortal spirits, like everyone.
As you say, these two little lines, you can think a lot of things, and it makes me think, and I want to know what you guys see in it, or how you see it. It says God created the universe and all the beings and everything else. But to me, partly by what we're getting from science, that, you know, stars are being born every day, and new planets and new galaxies and all of that. The idea that I get is not that God created, but God keeps creating. So it's kind of like a continuous creation. And I already feel very small in a way, thinking about that vast universe. And this is what I know, because science has told us, hey, we can look up to, I don't know, 13.5 billion years, whatever it is. So we can see those many light years ahead, and we know all that is there. But we don't even know what's, you know, behind that or parallel to that, or and even within that huge, vast space, but still finite space, new things are being created. So I feel very small, and that makes me feel even smaller. But at the same time, I think it's wonderful that I'm part of that. You know, even if it's a tiny part.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does make you think, and you know, it makes you think how, you know, it makes you realize how small we are. But we're also made up of the same things, like the same things that make up our body are the elements. They've been recycled through the universe, you know, hundreds and thousands and millions of years over and over again. Raphael was talking about the science, so is Juan. You know, we look at the vastness of space, and we see it as empty, but science is now showing us that that empty space is not just empty space, it's filled with energy, like it's teeming with something is there. We can't really, you know, people call it dark matter, and there's dark energy, but there's something in that empty space. It's not just empty space, it's not a vacuum. There is an energy there. We're slowly starting to discover it. We've recently discovered gravitational waves. So there is a science behind it, and that science is just God's natural law. It's just a very simple set of laws that govern everything. Everything that makes up our physical bodies, all the elements, they can all be traced back to one principal element. And maybe that's just one vibration of God's intelligence, God's consciousness, God's love. And through that, we're slowly progressing through this vast universe, all connected somehow. Like Carl Sagan said, we're made of stardust.
I guess it all comes down to evolution. You know, something that's nothing that we can't see is actually the next step in our evolution. You know, in Spiritism, and in the talk today, she talked about different worlds. And that's a belief, and that's combining science and combining a belief in that something that we cannot see is actually an evolution on our part. You know, the lighter that we become, we go to another place where it's more evolutionized. And that to me is a pretty cool theory.
And she was talking about our moral evolution, you know, and that was like, that's what we should really be focusing on. That's what the topic of our lecture was tonight. So I was actually thinking about that. Maybe I could ask you guys, like, as we're talking about like the properties of God and that God is a creator and all these things we're mentioning, how does that affect your daily life? Like when you go out into the world, you know, we can sit here and talk about Spiritism and theorize about it and like say how much we know. What, like when you're at work or with your family or friends, like how does that knowledge like change your behavior? Like how does it impact your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to a talk a couple days ago, and they were talking about how knowing how physics and chemistry works, like how atoms attract each other, knowing that and talking about it won't really help you talk about like the stock market. Like if something happened in the stock market and you're trying to explain like what happened, like breaking it down to like an elemental level, your conversation isn't going to get very far.
Well, that's all rigged anyway. Right?
Yeah. I mean, even though it's all connected, you know, it's not going to help you in your conversation in your everyday life. But at the same time, everything really is connected. I mean, for me, simply whenever I interact with people, and I do work with some, you know, difficult people, and I'm sure everyone does. It's, you know, you in the back of your mind, you know, these things pop up. It's like, you know, there is a bigger world out there. There is, you know, it isn't just about you. It's, you know, it's what can I do to make the situation better? You know, how can I, you know, change my thoughts to be more positive? It's a constant, for me, it's a constant battle, you know, thinking about those things, controlling my thoughts, my actions, trying to stay positive, and just trying to be positive around the people around me.
Because I think you get like, I'm sorry, I think you just get like a little bit of a glimpse of like a bigger picture, you know, like when you start to like dive into this kind of stuff. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, and that's perfect. We're all talking about the same thing here. So, you know, we contribute to the development of our world. We contribute to the development of ourselves, which is the real key thing that we can change, right? We can change ourselves. But how we do ourselves and how we interact with others and how we interact in our world contributes to the evolution of our in our homes, our families, our neighborhoods, our cities, states, our countries, and countries to other nations, and nations equal the planet, right, the world. So if you take your little speck that you are, right, how small you are, and you can even look around to some folks in the past, you know, that we've seen, some elevated spirits that came on a mission. And great, so you see some of the things they've done and how they've impacted people. But it's easy to forget in our material world what you do for yourself, how it impacts you and your evolution, but again, how it contributes to the world around you. And you talk about a positive influence. So we're talking about things that are real. Now we're talking about immaterial, we're talking about thought, words, actions, all right, all immaterial, right? These are vibrations, this is energy. So you're talking about the positive thinking, and you can see we've read these studies, you know, about the negative person and, you know, the positive person and how it acts on things around them, right? Including plants. They've done studies looking at, you know, arguments and the plants that die in a house, you know, in an environment where there's no arguments, and the plants thrive, and they got the exact same food and the exact same water at the exact same time with the same temperature and sun and all these things. How could this be, right? So now we're talking about these immaterial things, these energies. So I think it's important, and I'm connecting the dots back to Steve's question, which is how do we apply this in our life? So if we can get out of the way all these material things in our outer world, all those shiny things, you know, and all the fancy things or whatever it is that you typically might see in a materialism type culture, and you break it down into how do I want to live my life? How can this benefit me? I want to be happy. If I can exercise, if I can learn and work, and I think that's an important word, work, you know, to practice what we can learn through the content and context of this material, then I can help myself, which then this is energy I'm putting out into the world. It's going to intermingle with everyone in my own personal circle. And then the 7 degrees of separation, imagine a domino effect on how that can change other people's lives. You have no clue. You're just being you, do you. but the impact of this and the momentum of this. So we build our own worlds, we build our own nations, we build our own planet, right? So again, I have to be responsible for me and this planet so that I can help others. Without helping others, helping me can help others. And this is, again, how it can apply to me, but it's not me. It can help all of humanity for me doing me. Is that making sense? This is what I'm trying to say.
I think it starts, it all connects together. It makes you become aware of what you say, who you are, what you do. And it's a domino effect that goes and triggers to other people as well. And that has to do with energy, that has to do with character, that has to do with charity, humility. These are things that make us a better person. And if we could work on ourselves and set an example for other people, but it starts with us first.
Yeah, I think there's many aspects in the day-to-day life, at least for me. The thought that I'm really an immortal spirit, and that idea has been the number one game changer in my life. So many things have changed in my life. But as you were asking the question, I was thinking about simply my attitude towards, let's say, my attitude towards the planet. And because for a long time I've been involved in environmental questions and climate change and all of that. And there's this idea that always caught my attention when you're talking about climate change and caring about the planet. You always say, well, let's leave a better planet for our children than the one we received, or at least let's keep these, the best way we can. Let's not destroy it for them, because we're gonna go and they're gonna stay, they're gonna stay here. So let's do it for them. And it's a very compelling argument for many people who have children or grandchildren even, right? But then at some point I thought, hey, I'm not just doing it for them, I'm doing it for myself, because I'm gonna be coming back here. So, that idea of plant a tree even if you're gonna die tomorrow, or next year, even if you're not gonna see that tree growing, sure, that's very nice, but I'm gonna see that tree growing sooner or later. I'll be coming back. I'm gonna live in this planet. It's not just a way of saying this is my home for 80 years. No, this is my home, period, for a very long time.
80 lifetimes.
Yeah, and whatever I do here today, it's going to, it's like, think about a physical home. If you don't maintain the home, 20, 30 years down the road, you're gonna have leaks, and it's gonna be a pain to live in that place, and so on. So you have to, kind of like have to do that, thinking about the time that you're gonna be there. Even if only for that, it's something that changed my way of acting. Because sure, I could think about the ones that are gonna stay, being children and grandchildren and so on, but now it's me too.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because we did a video a couple of years ago where we were talking about somebody who's very prominent and is an atheist, and was saying that he wanted to leave a better world for his children. And it's like, well, if you're an atheist, and he was a materialist, said like, when I die, he said, put my body in the ground and the worms will eat me, and they'll it'll recycle all the material. It's like all he was focused on, and he was just like, but he's like, but I want to leave a good world for my children. And I was thinking like, well, why? If you really believe like what you just said, why would you even have children? Why bother? Like, why not just do you? You know what I mean? But so it's interesting that even somebody who doesn't believe in God, is an atheist, You know, it doesn't really matter like really what you believe. What really matters is what you do. That guy might actually have a better moral character than somebody who is a spiritist and like a total like knows every book and every letter but doesn't, you know, doesn't live it, you know. And what I really wanted to mention too was that like for me to answer my own question, if I may, you know, be one of those kind of guys that asks the question and answers it myself. If I talk about myself in the third person, that'd be even better. Like for Steve, when he goes to work, that idea that I can affect the mental environment around me, and I've been practicing this a little bit. I just noticed like I have one coworker in particular. I have a couple, but one in particular that's like particularly difficult for me. And every job I go to, there's always at least one. So it's like I'm not going to quit this job and try and think I'm going to get a better job with, you know. I'm like, I decided to stay in this one until I like see it through, you know. And I realized one day that this coworker, like when they get on my nerves, they push my buttons, that I would just sit there and I would like hate them and I would just like be angry. I wouldn't say anything, you know, but in my mind I'm thinking like, man, I really hate this guy. And even if I didn't say anything to him, like it would just escalate and get worse and worse and worse. So like one day I realized, I like caught myself doing this. I was like, you know what you got to do is like stop that, you know. And so I turned around, like it wasn't easy. Like I'm not saying I just like turn into like a fountain of love or anything, but I made the effort to like, when I got those thoughts, like stop those thoughts, turn it around, think about like, you know, think about you, like have a little humility and think about like him and you being, you know, brothers on planet Earth. Just think about something positive. And over time, like over the last couple of years, the environment has gotten better. You know, like the mental environment, you can actually sort of feel it like when you walk into the place. I'm not saying like it's it's like walking into a spiritist center where you just like hear angels singing or anything like that. It's not like that, but it's definitely like where before like the tension in the air was like palpable all the time. Now it's like and we're getting to the other side where we're actually like having good interactions and like enjoy each other's company. It's like I feel a little weird saying it, like I want to throw up in my mouth a little bit, you know, but but like, you know, like we're actually kind of friendly and we joke around and we have a good time, and I just like I spotted it today. I'm like, wow, we're actually having some like genuine moments of like kind of like fraternity. You know, it's like it's getting better. So that's just something that's like, if you like take the time and put the effort into it, like it can get better. And that idea that like I'm not just a material body, I have my paraspirit and my other like mental bodies, and that I'm radiating thoughts, and other people can pick those up too, like whether they realize it or not. Like they might say like I'm not a medium, I'm not anything, they still like.
And let me ask you, do you think you lost anything on the way by doing that?
Yeah.
Because
all that anger and hate.
Because many people say, I don't want to do that because, you know, I may lose whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, I mean, there was some people, like I have a friend at the job that would tell me like, you know, that guy comes in the office and he says all these bad things about you and he's always gossiping, you know. And I told her, I said like, look, what he says about me behind my back is none of my business. You know, I mean, it's not like I came up with that. Like somebody told me that, and it's like I think everybody here like knows about my coworkers. I've like talked about it. Like I hope they don't watch YouTube, you know. But it's like because it's been like a difficult process for me. But you know, I've been making the effort, and yeah, I mean, I actually was thinking about like just my personal experience is that like I don't talk about this a lot, but I'm a cancer survivor. You know, I had Hodgkin's disease, and I went through chemotherapy and radiation, and had a bone marrow transplant. And when I feel that anger that I felt like for this guy, I was like, I'm gonna give myself cancer again. Like I'm gonna like, it's the same kind of feeling that like, that like if you really believe that like your thoughts and feelings and emotions can manifest diseases, like I'm like, this is gonna like, this is gonna come back. I was like, I need to work on this. You know, like, thank God, like, I'm healthy and science helped me out with that. But it's like, now I feel like it's my responsibility to take action to, like, better myself on a moral level. You know?
I think we can extend the conversation I was saying earlier, and you touched on all of it when we're talking about, you know, thought, right? So thought travels, you know, the energy, and there's a fluid, and it does reach the other person. It does affect, you know, I mean, if you were to sit here and throw black tar on that wall, like every day for half an hour, and you come back in a month, what do you think the wall is going to look like? Okay, it's going to be affected. So everything you put out, right, into the universe, everything, it's out there, and it's going to collect with the rest of the kinds of things. Or if you're directing a certain energies, bad energies, negative energies, positive energies, they're going to meet with the people. And again, depending on who's receiving them, it can be, you know, built up into even more of this anger or resentment or, you know, unforgiveness, whatever these things are. Back to the immaterial things, right, that we're talking about in the beginning, things that we can't see, feel, touch, but we can feel this. And through Spiritism, we're learning, or have learned that this is how it works, right? So this is energy that moves from place to place. All of us have probably witnessed, you know, somebody walking in the room, and they just have this energy and this smile, and it's just like, you know, as they walk through the room, you can just see the room kind of responding to this person. They're not saying one word, right? If you think about it, probably everybody's witnessed this. Just from their energy, from their, you know, their smile, just the way they, you know, do themselves, because they're upbeat and they're you know, radiating this, right? So all these things are real, and I think, you know, if this is the gift that we have, well, you know, how could that be, right? Then you're going to connect some more dots with free will, and now I have choices to make about how I conduct my own life, how I live my own life. You know, I want to be happy. I want to, you know, put off good energy. I want to learn. I want to grow. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do. And it doesn't mean it all happens all the same minute, right? So you'll need to have a few other virtues like patience and, you know, persistence and tolerance and some other things along the way to navigate that path. But ultimately, everything we learn through Spiritism, you know, it just boils down to, you know, those same core values. You know, love one another, help one another. And again, you can, as you learn these key attributes, the way to conduct your life, you know, you find your way to forgiveness, you find your way to patience, you find your way to humility. It's a natural path, you know. So again, it's you know, let's separate the material outer world of all the things flying around that, you know, you got to grab onto, and let's get back to basics of what, you know, what are the core attributes and the energies and the existence of my life stream, right? Of my human experience. You know, we talked about animate and inanimate, right? So I'm in an inanimate body, animating it through my own spirit. So I have a life stream that I was created with, and I'm animating this body so I can have more experiences to elevate myself. How profound is that?
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to mention, like, when I was first, like, coming into the idea, like, just spirituality, not Spiritism, but like a long time before, when I was getting spiritual, I looked up spiritual in the dictionary, trying to figure out, like, what does that even mean, you know? And what the dictionary told me was, like, that it's trying to get the big picture, you know? And that's really, like, what we're talking about today is, like, the big picture is knowing that, like, what you see and feel and touch, like, with our normal senses isn't the end of it, and there's more than meets the eye, you know, and that's what that's what really, like, all of us are saying, is, like, realizing that fact that there's more to life than just, you know, what you can see, feel, touch, and hear. Like, it'll change the way you live. It'll change the course of your ideas and change your actions and give you other motivation. All right, well, thank you guys so much for the talk. It was enlightening for me. It actually gave me a lot to think about too. Like, you know, I'm always thinking about, but, you know, as I watch the video, I get to think about it again. So I appreciate it. So thank you so much, Manny. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Steve.
Join us next week on Beyond the Veil.